Hi everyone, this video is to introduce the fourth and fifth major projects for WRIT 1120. That is the Autoethnography and the ePortfolio. And the reason I'm introducing these two projects together is because they go hand in hand and they're essential to one another. The first thing to remember about the Autoethnography and the ePortfolio is that both are required to pass WRIT 1120. And this is true for all sections across the university. You must turn in both the Autoethnography and the ePortfolio by the end of the semester in order to earn a passing grade. These are the final two major projects that we're working on this semester, and they work together in some interesting ways. The Autoethnography serves as the introduction to your ePortfolio. It should be reflective in nature, and it uses your writing as the data for making your argument. It is essentially a reflective project, but you're still using evidence from throughout the semester to demonstrate how you've grown as a writer or to talk about your writing. The ePortfolio is a curated collection of your writing. It's essentially a collection that demonstrates the different projects, the different writing that you've done throughout the semester. It's introduced by that Autoethnography, and the organization and structure are your decision. So although you have to include the Autoethnography and some other writing, the way that you do that, the way that you put it all together, is up to you. Let's go into depth a little bit more about the Autoethnography now. The Autoethnography needs to be at least 4 pages long, or if you're doing a digital equivalent, should be at least 8 minutes. Different ways to approach the Autoethnography include thinking about the Autoethnography as showing an audience of inexperienced researchers how you addressed a researched project. This is to provide them with helpful tips and tricks for their research. So think of it like you're giving them advice based on your experience in the course. The second way to approach the Autoethnography is to think about it as an analysis of your growth as a writer. So throughout this course, or perhaps even throughout your time at Bowling Green, consider how you've grown as a writer. Think about your audience as not just your instructor, but also yourself. Think about how you can reflect on the growth, the differences, the challenges you've overcome, and ultimately where you are now and where you might be later on. Regardless of your approach, your writing is the data that you're using to base your analysis and reflection on. That means you should be using examples from your writing to demonstrate what it is you're talking about. If you're confused about what that might look like, let's talk about some potential data collection points for your Autoethnography. First of all, you might think of some qualitative collection points. Things like reflections and predictions that you made in discussion boards or other writing tasks. Early on, you might have talked about goals that you had for your writing this semester. You might have talked about ways that you hoped your writing would grow. Those could be potential areas that you could include in your Autoethnography. You might also include things like feedback that's received from your instructor, your peers, the writing center, or other readers in discussion boards and on drafts that you've turned in. You could also use your writing itself, so things like pieces of your major projects, responses in discussion boards, other reflective pieces, and revisions, and the changes you've made from draft to draft that altered your writing and helped you grow. Habits, settings, or other conditions that you noticed you favored or took on in writing this semester can also be useful. So maybe you started the semester writing in crowded coffee shops or in the student union, and you noticed that you don't write best in a noisy, crowded area, and you started to change where you wrote. You started to write in your dorm room or in your bedroom or at your kitchen table where it was quiet. You might have also noticed that you work best when you have a snack beside you or a cup of coffee. What are some things that you've noticed about your environment or ways that you write best? Some other collection points might be quantitative in nature. So think about maybe the number of drafts that you completed for each project. Did that increase as time went on, decrease, stay the same? Maybe the time you spent on your writing process. Perhaps you initially were a procrastinator who wrote drafts the day before they were due or the night they were due, but you started to spend more time later in the semester planning and plotting out your writing process. Maybe that's not true. Maybe you still are a procrastinator and you think that you work best in those circumstances. You also could think about any changes to your writing process, increases, decreases between the number of drafts, time spent, the amount of time from thinking of an idea to it culminating in a writing project, the number of pages that you wrote. Any of those things could be data collection points. This is not a comprehensive list. You might have other ideas about places for data collection that you could use. Now let's talk about the autoethnography format and style. As is true for any project that uses data, you should include quotations, charts, figures, or other examples that demonstrate your analysis. So keep in mind that even though the autoethnography is reflective, you're still making an argument of some kind. Your thesis should be argumentative. If you're referring to a specific piece of writing that you're using to support that thesis, please cite it. So use parentheses in your project for in-text citations. You don't need to include a works cited or references page unless you're citing secondary sources, so things beyond your own writing. So some examples if you aren't quite sure what I mean. Maybe in my writing, I use a discussion board as support or to demonstrate a particular argument that I'm making. I could use something like week 13 revision and use that in my in-text citation so that readers understand that that's the discussion board I'm referring to. I could also refer to specific drafts, so things like researched project rough draft, incident analysis polished draft. Now let's talk about the ePortfolio in a little bit more depth. Keep in mind that it's a curated collection of your writing. That means that you need to include not just that autoethnography, but also other examples of your writing. Which examples you include are up to you, but you should be including something beyond just that reflective introduction. Curation is all about making choices of what to include. So think about someone who might design a museum exhibit. They're curating by choosing this piece of art, but not this piece. They're choosing different elements to include to ultimately make some kind of argument. The ePortfolio project asks you to curate or collect your writing from the semester with the intention of reflecting on your progress. So your argument is essentially to demonstrate your evolution as a writer. You should be using things like your drafts, your discussion posts, and the autoethnography to demonstrate that growth. Use the ePortfolio as a chance to curate and reflect on your experiences. Consider the ways that you've achieved course objectives and developed in this course. So you can refer back to those course objectives. You can refer to learning goals that you might have had throughout the semester that you made personally. What are some different things that you could include in the ePortfolio? You can include in progress and polished drafts of the major projects. So that's any rough drafts, process work, things that you were working on for those major projects. If you completed revision 1 and or revision 2, those could go in there as well. Any additional process work that you've done. So even if it's something you haven't turned in, things like outlines, notes, free writes, mapping, doodling, anything you've done to help you as a writer, you could include. You can also do things like introduce and contextualize your projects with assignment introductions. So you might write a little bit about each project. You could also organize your ePortfolio into different sections, and maybe you want to include an introduction to each section to contextualize why you've done your organization the way that you have, why you've designed it the way that you have. You can include sources and additional data or materials that you didn't include in your project. So maybe you had some sources that were really interesting to you that you didn't include, or data from your primary research that didn't quite make it into your projects, but you want to put here. If you had any artifacts or pieces that didn't make it into your projects, but that you were sad that they didn't fit in or that you really worked hard on and they didn't see the light of day, this is a great place to include them. You can also include materials that contextualize and describe your writing, so things that aren't necessarily your writing itself, but that were meaningful to you this semester. Did you always sit down and listen to a particular album before you wrote? Are there songs that you think help describe your writing process? What about images? Do you want to take a picture of your writing space, where you ultimately work on your writing? Images of you doing your writing? What about videos? Are there any videos you took of you doing writing or videos that you think describe your writing? Memes, poems, reflections, GIFs, anything that you think helps describe your writing process, give context or additional information about your growth as a writer is fair game. Also keep in mind that the way you organize all of these elements is up to you. So you could follow a structure that organizes each of your pages or sections of your portfolio into assignments. Maybe you have a section for your incident analysis, a section for your research proposal, a section for your research project. That's completely fine. Maybe you have themes that you want to organize these elements around. Maybe you want to follow different habits of mind and create a section around each of those. Maybe you want to organize it around an album that you listen to, and each section is named after a song. How do you submit all these elements now that we've talked about them? The autoethnography should be included in the ePortfolio, but I also want you to submit it in Canvas as a file. So whether you're doing a video or a paper submission, please still submit it to the autoethnography section. You're going to complete a rough draft as well as a polished draft of the autoethnography so that you can get some feedback on it, and that's why I want you to submit them to Canvas. The ePortfolio will be submitted as a link, so you should copy and paste the link of the ePortfolio into the Canvas submission space, and I'll access it that way. How do you access the ePortfolio system in Canvas? So keep in mind that when you do your ePortfolio, you're going to use the Canvas system to create it. The easiest way to go about this is when you enter your Canvas homepage, before you click on our course or anything else, click on your avatar on the side, wherever it has your user details. Typically, this is the top thing on the left-hand menu bar in Canvas. When you do that, it should pop out with a menu that has 4 things listed: notifications, files, settings, and ePortfolios. Click on ePortfolios. It should then take you to this homepage that has what's an ePortfolio at the top, and it describes a little bit about ePortfolios. To get started making one, click on the Create an ePortfolio button. It's going to come to a page that says Make an ePortfolio, and it asks you to give your ePortfolio a name. You can name this whatever you'd like. Your last name and WRIT 1120 is probably a good thing to name it. You could also do something completely different. The main thing to make sure you're doing on this page is not checking the box that says Make it public. Please do not make your ePortfolio public. That's not a good plan. That means that your portfolio is searchable, and we don't want that. Instead, keep it private. Don't check that box. Click Make ePortfolio. Then it's going to take you to the welcome page. This is where you'll find things like the Getting Started wizard, any advice that you might need or help tutorials, etc. on creating the portfolio. And it's going to have your organization there of your ePortfolio on the left and the right-hand side. The main thing to notice about this page for right now is that it provides you with a link to share your ePortfolio. When you go to submit this in Canvas to me, do not copy the link that's in the search bar of your browser. Don't copy the URL in Chrome or Mozilla at the very top. Instead, copy under where it says your ePortfolio is private, that little orange link right there, the copy and share this link to give others access. That is the link you're going to copy and share. Please copy that one and paste it into the submission box. You can copy this link at any time and submit it. Even if your ePortfolio isn't completed yet, it will not change. That link remains the same, so I can access it at any time. Remember, first and foremost, you have to submit both these things to pass 1120. So please make sure if you're struggling, you're having complications or issues, or just have questions about the project, to let me know as soon as possible.